And the message that dominated most of the speakers, including our very own President John Dramani Mahama, has to do with security in the sub-region, Boko Haram to be precise, in Nigeria. Do we commit men on the foot? We'll talk more about it. Our correspondent Komla Kluche, however, joins us with some updates on the Ecowas summit.
The grounds to ensure that there's lasting peace and security on the continent. Joining me is the Executive Director for the West African Network for Peace Building, Mr. Emmanuel BomBande. Now, you have listening to the leaders. You've heard what they've said. They'll be going into the closed door section. Your main expectations of the discussions bordering on security.
Thank you, Komla. What I want us to do is for your viewers to appreciate that this is the 45th Ordinary Summit. It tells you how we've evolved. It tells you how, as a sub-region, we've been able to put together the mechanisms to work collectively at various levels. So we should congratulate ourselves as citizens of West Africa and our leaders at the level of heads of state and government. And to that extent, it's then in that context that when you look at the peace and security of West Africa, no country can do it alone, because the new threats that have emerged and continue to emerge are the type of threats that do not appear in a country solely on that sovereign geographical space, but these threats continue to evolve around the region in a way that makes the issues in one country to spill over across into another. So if you take the rising threats of violent extremism, it does not mean that it is peculiar to Mali. What it simply means is that Mali was so vulnerable that it came under the invasion of the insurgents, and these insurgents would not have stopped in Mali for the purposes of taking the northern half of Mali. They would have continued to spread across the region, and that threat continues to be, in my view, very real. But it is for this collective effort that we have been able to stop it now for a while, and whether or not we'll be able to deal with it effectively in the long term is another issue that we need to talk about.
Question, and that talks also about the commitment of the various leaders. You as a civil society, I know you've done some extensive work on this. You've been in talks with the government, the political heads and all that, but one wonders why it continues to happen. The issues, for instance, in Nigeria, a Nigerian man would not necessarily congratulate its government at this time looking at the work of Boko Haram on a daily basis.
Now, first of all, let me put on the table what is it in Ecowas that all the citizens of West Africa should appreciate. Ecowas provides us the collective framework through which we have signed the treaties and protocols that makes it possible for us to work together. Were it not for the sub-regional intergovernmental organization, we will not be able to do that. And yet, no country can go it alone in trying to secure its boundaries and guarantee the protection of its citizens and its people. And it is for that reason that if you look at the landscape of the region, and if you thought that the challenges were enormous, the question you should ask is, what would have happened? What would have happened if we do not have this collective effort that I have described? And without going into the details, we are looking at the Ecowas Treaty itself that gave us the political principles, the norms that we own. It is not somebody who brought it here. Then the 1999 Protocol on Peacekeeping and Peace and Security, then the Supplementary Protocol in 2001 on Democracy and Good Governance. All these have created the enabling environment that makes it possible for a collective effort. But that does not mean that the challenges that you describe are not pervasive. For example, if you made reference to a Nigerian in northeast Nigeria, why would such a Nigerian thank any government? Now, as you know, the northeastern part of Nigeria borders with Cameroon. The threats of Boko Haram are crisscrossing and spilling across the borders between northern Cameroon and northern Nigeria to the northeast. Cameroon is not a member of Ecowas. Chad is not a member of Ecowas. And that is why Ecowas as a collective body strategically must look at the implication of how the region must engage with non-Ecowas states who are borders with Ecowas. And that's why strategically we have our collective framework, but how do we engage with others? Now you can see already progress in that direction, because in this summit that
you heard Emmanuel BomBande from 1F speaking on what the leaders perhaps should be looking at as we're faced with the threat of terrorism from Nigeria's Boko Haram and that of Al-Shabaab, Islamist militant Al-Shabaab there. And